About a year ago now, Jane and I, along with a large group of diocesan clergy, gathered in North Conway for our annual winter retreat. When you go to these retreats, you never know what to expect. Yes, there's always free time to go shopping or go skiing for an afternoon or playing in the water sports area. You can expect that. But when it comes to serious, thoughtful time, that's something else. Often there'll be some sort of a write-up that will give you an advance notice about what the retreat leader is going to be about and where he's going to be leading. But that's not always so. Jane will know a lot more about what to expect than I do, because she serves on the Diocesan Clergy Development Committee, and therefore she's part of the planning for these events. And second, she just doesn't know because she is never up for surprises. For me, it's different. I take it as it comes. Surprise me! But sometimes that doesn't work out too well either. But on this occasion, it turned out very, very well. The retreat leader, his name was Father Terry Gallagher, who I took an instant liking to because he was a Canadian. So naturally, he had to be all right. And also you could tell that immediately that he was a deeply spiritual man, and that no matter who you were, he had a warm place in his heart for you. Father Gallagher belongs to a Roman Catholic order of priests and layfolk called the Scarborough Missions, which is located just to the east of the city of Toronto in the township of Scarborough. That's how it got its name. And the purpose of the mission is the promotion of peace in the world through interfaith dialogue supported by the Golden Rule. Do to others what you would like them to do to you. And I find that fascinating, and I find that very encouraging, that the Roman Church, which I find in some ways to be rather rigid and doctrinaire, actually and actively supports and encourages this mission in its work. Again, the work of promoting dialogue between people of various faiths. Not simply people of the Christian tradition, various denominations, but we're talking about people of other faiths, other world religions. And that's sometimes a scarcity in the world. The prevailing idea in some parts has been, and still is, that we have the truth, and you don't. We're right, and you're wrong. We're heaven-bound, but you're hell-bound. We're the in-group, you're the out-group. We're the good guys, you're the bad guys. Not a very solid base on which to build dialogue and understanding. It sounds a little bit like Washington these days. People at loggerheads, a competition of disparate ideologies. I think of a lecture that I went to some years ago by Karen Armstrong, a former nun, and an author and a historian of religion, in which she spoke about the axial period in human history, that time roughly between 800 years before Christ and about 200 years after his birth. A time when the spiritual foundation of humanity was laid in various parts of the world. It was a time when in the major religions that were present on the face of the earth, that they were thinking essentially the same way about one very, very important question. And the question was, how do we all get along together despite our differences without destroying one another? And believe it or not, they all came up with the same answer, even though there was virtually no contact of one group with the other. Some may call it a coincidence, but maybe it's something else. Certainly I believe this, as the biblical phrase goes, in the fullness of time, God. God, in God's time, reveals God's nature. And the answer that came up in these various parts of the world, in its most simplistic form, was this: do not do to others what you hope they would refrain from doing to you. That was the message from above. That is what God desires for God's world, for God's people everywhere across the face of the earth. Now that sounds like an extremely bright idea, but an idea that through history, as someone once said, has been more honored in the breach than in the observance. It was in this axial period that the prophet Isaiah appeared, and who, in looking out on the world that he knew, saw a whole lot that he knew was most displeasing to God. In comparing what was happening in the everyday world against what God had instructed the people through Moses, there was an enormous gap. I've been reading a historical novel in the last few weeks by Ken Follett, thanks to Allan Zimmerman, entitled The Pillars of the Earth. This story is set in 12th century England, a time of great spiritual fervor, when many of the great cathedrals in northern Europe were being constructed, and not always being constructed for the best of reasons. There was a TV program recently showing about some of the building of some of the cathedrals in Europe, and how one area would compete against the other to see how high they could go, which didn't always lead to good results. But in reading this novel, one gets a picture of how things have been through the ages when people's hearts are set on the things of the earth and not always on the things of God. Where those who, with an advantage, continuously seek for a greater advantage. Where political power, whether in the affairs of the state or in the affairs of the church, is abused, and justice is perverted. We have a picture in this novel of kings and lords and earls who rape and murder and pillage, and bishops and priests who have developed hypocrisy to a fine art, who turn a blind eye to corruption all around them so that they too can share in the booty of shameful behavior. The ideal of doing to others what you would want done to yourself was far from being realized in the time of Isaiah. Yet Isaiah could sing out and sing out with fervor, "Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord shall be upon you." It is a vision of hope for the future. A vision that finally comes to be displayed in the world, in the life of Jesus, the incarnate God, God in the flesh, Emmanuel, God with us. His life is the light that shines in the darkness. It is the light that illuminates our pathway through the dark forests of sin and error. His life is the light which, when we receive him, leads us to righteousness, leads us to right living, leads us to peace with God, leads us to peace with one another. So today, we celebrate the Epiphany, the revealing of the light of Christ to the whole world via the Magi bearing gifts fit for a king. Though Jesus was a Jew, though Jesus was born into the culture and the religion of the Jewish people, the light that was in him was light not just for the Jewish people, but it was light for the whole world, for all humanity, in all space and in all time. Sought out by the Magi from the east, the light now extends fully into the Gentile world, not confined to one small tribe. This light we have been privileged to receive, and it is ours to give away. It is ours to share as it has been shared with us. Not to be hoarded, not to be kept to ourselves, not to be seen as making us better than others, as some have thought. In my first year of university, I had a roommate who happened to be an Anglican, as all of us Episcopalians are. Except in Canada, we call them Anglicans rather than Episcopalians. He invited me to come to church with him the following morning because it was Ash Wednesday. While most of you know that I was of a different denominational persuasion at the time, I did have some familiarity with Anglicans. In fact, I loved the liturgy whenever I went to the local parish church in the town where I grew up, mostly in my teenage years, usually on a Boy Scout church parade. So I was familiar. So I said yes to Peter, my roommate, and so next morning off we went to church for the distribution of ashes and for the reception of communion. And I can still picture myself to this day kneeling at that communion rail, taking in the sights before me of that silver chalice, golden on the inside, and the wine inside it, the fresh, sweet smell of the wine. It was a sacred moment for me. Well, later that day, one of the members of the residence that Peter and I lived in started griping to Peter. How come you took someone to communion who has no idea whatever about what he's doing, who has absolutely no idea what it's all about? His name was Frank Abbott. Frank Abbott, you were wrong. I hope you can hear me. You did the wrong thing. You were the one who missed the message. You had no idea what it was all about. You acted like a sophomore. The church is not some secret society with secret practices and secret knowledge withheld from the unwise, the foolish, and the stupid. The church rejected Gnosticism centuries ago. And the church is in total error if it makes itself look big by making others look small. If it makes itself right by marking others as wrong. Enough already of that kind of attitude. The Jesus that we proclaim, who came as the light of the world, is the Jesus of infinite patience, of infinite love, of infinite respect, who in all that he said and all that he did made it clear that the pathway to God is never, never less than striving to do to others what we wish them to do to us. Never, never less than striving not to do to others what we wish others would not do to us. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you. A blessed Epiphany to all.